Welcome, everyone, and thank you, Glenda, and thank you to all the NorCal MWA members, of which I am one. And so I'm here to, do you think I'm in Paris, right? Well, I would be if I could be, but so when I'm writing, I like to put this, on my wall because it's a place in Paris I love, but my books are set in Paris. But I'm here to talk about location, location, location in your writing. I mean, have you ever heard a real estate agent go, it's all about location, location, location. And why is that? What is it about place, the setting? What is it that really, means home or means a foreign location or what is that and why do we need to get that in our books? Because I think place in fiction, it's not only about the setting, but it can also inform and be reflected in the character, in the plot, the theme of the story, the whole atmosphere, the voice, the language. And a strong sense of place helps readers to imagine and to make that leap on the page into another world, a world that could be past, present, future. And I deal with this often in my books because my stories are set in Paris and I don't live in Paris full time. And also it's about writing about a certain time. So it's really important that I'm always kind of thinking about that. And so I came up with 5 things, maybe there's 6 or maybe some of the 5 weave into each other, but 5 things for writing sense of place, for writing a location. And you may have more, find more. But I sort of said 5 and then it kind of went into more and then it kind of looped back in because they're all kind of intertwined. So here's some techniques for making writing an authenticity in your sense of place, in your place. Use the 5 senses, right? Taste, touch, smell, the visual, which we use a lot, the oral, the auditory. And what I want to say is I found out when I was writing, I used visual all the time. I used a lot of sounds, but I was never using the tactile sense. I think that's really important because just think if you were touching this building that's behind me, a 17th century mansion somewhere in the Marais, it's been redone, but there's still like a pockmarked feel to the limestone. And there's, that kind of thing that we need to remember to use that sense that we're not often seeing on the page. And so just think about that. It's not only walking down a street, what you're seeing visually, but it's also what is that place like? Are we walking in a slum area of Naples? Are we walking on the Las Vegas Strip? What does that say about where we are? And when you touch something, what is it like? The smooth linoleum or the zinc bar or something, or the greasy pole, which I've often in a bus, right? And think about the smell. Now in Paris, it's like this incredible, festival of smells because it's always butter from the bakery. Someone's baking. It's this wonderful smell of the patisserie. The cars and the buses they use used to be diesel. So there was that smell. Now they're going to electric. And there's so many smells. Someone's perfume as they go by, the smell of cigarettes, the smell of, of a baby, that's just been freshly, had a bath, or freshly laundered sheets in a hotel. I think there's always these special smells that we really, really can be useful on the page. Okay, visual, we talked about that, what you see. And then it's also what you don't see. If a character is walking down the street and expects to see a building, like this, but realizes they made a wrong turn and they're in a, dilapidated housing project, what does that say? And also the auditory. What is, when you're there, what do you hear? Okay? Do you hear the patter of rain? Do you hear, I don't know, cement cracking on a construction site? Do you hear, these stilettos, high heels walking at night? And these are just wonderful things to bring you to that place. And what's really important, I've been thinking about this a lot, is using the emotion or the feeling that that place evokes in your character. Okay? Being here, what does that mean? Because that's what's important in the story. Does it complement it? Does this emotion feel like, oh, this is where, this person is discovering it for the first time? Does it deepen it? Adds some understanding or contrast, which is a great way to use that. What's really interesting in fiction, and I read it a lot of times, you've got this bucolic setting, this English countryside, the rolling fields, the hedgerows, the yew trees, and then there'll be a body, in the gully. So you've got that incredible contrast. You've got a stormy night. You've got a rainstorm. You've got people arriving in this house and freezing, and they walk in and there's a warm fire blazing, dry clothes. So there's just a great way to heighten that and put your character to have a reaction to this, to show their feeling. How do they feel? I mean, are they relieved? Are they angry that they should have been there before? Are they, and that's what I think is super great. Using the place to complement your character's emotion or to contrast it. There's so many ways you can think of. It's really important to be authentic to that time of that place. You picked a location, you've got your story, and what is it about this that will make it unique? When I wrote 3 Hours in Paris, which is my first standalone, I've written a series, Amy Leduc, and this is a historical standalone set in 1940, 2 weeks into the German occupation. I had to go, okay, to what people were wearing, what kind of shoes, because, people were not able to buy shoes in the store. What I had to go into that, what kind of language was used, what kind of propaganda would someone see on the street. This was 2 weeks in, so I couldn't look at newspapers because you know what? Everyone had fled Paris. Many people had fled Paris and they weren't printing newspapers. So it was really interesting what kinds of things I could find until I found the first newspaper printed June 23rd. It was one page, and to find recollections, what people were saying. And I found a lot of primary sources, people who wrote about that time and the 2 weeks in the German occupation, about how they, had to wait in line for food if the shop was even open. So there were these kinds of things, but you have to write what's true to that time, and authentic to the language and the habits. People who live in one part of town will speak in one way, and they wouldn't be probably in another part of town speaking that way. I was talking with Jacqueline Winspear the other day. She has a wonderful book, a memoir, This Time Next Year We'll Be Laughing. And I was asking Jackie about that because in her story, they talk about when they would have, what was it, a tea at 6 o'clock. And I said, that's kind of late, isn't it? She said, well, tea isn't like a high tea with a teapot and sandwiches and clotted cream. Our tea was what we would call in the States dinner, supper, a hot dish with meat or fish and two potatoes and vegetables. And that's, and I said, well, that's so interesting. She said, it's very class ridden, because my family were not upper class and that's how we referred to it. So there's all these things of language that are fascinating and you need to also get them right. And that brings us to social structure and the mores. What kind of economic class are your characters from? Who do they interact with? You know, where kind of places would they be going to, or would they be, you know, out of place there? I think before you can create a sense of place on the page, you need to immerse yourself in the world that you're writing about so that it comes alive for you, for me, for all of us who write. And the ways of doing this are to include wide reading. As I said, you can read primary sources, people's diaries, newspapers, research, can go to the archives, can go to the library. Research can be talking to a retired FBI man about explosives, which I did about 2 months ago. You've got, once you find these guys, I have a little question about explosives, and you put it on, there's a board and you put retired FBI. And if they want to, they'll contact you. And he was talking about, well, when I was, you know, in the Gulf War, and this is what we did. And I'm like, oh, wow, you know. And he goes, yeah, because after 85, we did this, and before we didn't. So you want to get those things accurate. And research is, you know, finding an expert in that field, whether it's a fireman or an arson detective, or a person a forensic pathologist, if you want to get that autopsy correct. That's, you know, those are gold, because speaking to people who are the experts in their field provide incredible things, as well as their experience and stories. Traveling, going to the location. You know, I could write about Paris and never having gone there. But it's so much better to go there if you can, because it's that one, you know, incredible thing that happens when you turn the corner and you see something, you bump into someone, or you take the bus in the wrong direction and you're so tired you don't get off, and you just watch Paris change around you. And it's that story or those characters who were sitting on the bus that often come to me. And I found, we're talking about location, location, location. When I took one bus, the 96, from my friend's house up in Belleville, the 20th arrondissement, so it kind of goes down the hill. It's northeast Paris, northeast, yeah. And it goes all the way to Montparnasse station, which goes from the right bank to the left bank. It's kind of like the middle towards the south. You go through all these arrondissements of Paris. All these different people get on the bus, get off the bus. You have children going to school. You have parents taking children to the doctors. You have women going to work. You have retirees going to a museum. And you have different kinds of people going on and off the bus. And it was like I realized I went through this sort of kaleidoscope. And so there's that incredible thing. I also ended up watching a lot of people on the bus as character inspirations. And because I was so tired, I was just taking notes. And some of those characters came on the page because they were real people, they were speaking, and I heard them and I saw the interaction. You know, observation is an incredible tool. Have that notebook with you. You know, write down, you know, there was one man, and I think he was talking to his grandson, and he was, you know, he had this way of shrugging, and the kid would, and they had this incredible kind of body dancing that worked for them. And those kind of quirks, you know, sitting in a cafe for an hour, 2 hours, which you can, and just watching people and noting the life on the street. I always feel it's important, if I'm going to write about a part of Paris, and I want to know it. If I don't get to stay there, if I can't stay with a friend there, I want to be there in the morning when people go to school, when they go to work. I want to be there, you know, midday to see who comes home for lunch or what cafes people eat at. I want to go to the market that's there in the morning. I want to come back in the afternoon, see the children coming home from school, going to the local park. I want to, you know, be by the metro at 6 or 7 o'clock when the people come home. And then I want to, you know, hang out where they're having an apéro before they go, you know, in the cafe before they go home. I want to see the people that come out later and go out. You know, I want to see it at all times of the day to get the pulse of that place, to see what it's like when light hits it at certain times. And I really, really feel that's research, and getting that on the page so that as a character, the character's standing there, seeing that, hearing that, smelling it, touching it, you know, everything, every sense is there to be used. And it's, you know, but if you research in the archives and libraries, you can pore over the books, you can look at maps, you can look at diaries, and, you know, looking at amazing things that are real. You can search the net, of course, which you probably have to do at this time in COVID. Visit cemeteries and museums. I found in my last trip to Paris, I went to the newly opened museum for the resistance. And when I walked in and I was looking around, it just opened. I was so lucky, and it's right across from the catacombs. They had found a newspaper published, I referred to it earlier, June 23rd, and it was a one-page sheet, and they were all worried about the Italians. Were they going to, you know, invade France, which who would have thought? But I was like, this is the first paper printed after the Germans marched into Paris. And so it was like I found, and I would never have been able, I didn't even know it existed. And I found it there. So, and of course, I was so happy to have that in my story, features in my story. But that's what you get from going there. You know, documents get declassified. Certain things are found in someone's attic. It's on eBay. You know, I find many, many things at the flea market in Paris. There's all kinds of, there's the big flea market you may have gone to out in Clignancourt or Porte de Vanves at the other side of Paris. But there's also what we would call, you know, like, you know, just attic sales. And you just, people get together, some couple of houses on the street, and they have sales from their attic or old things, or a church society, they'll have flea markets, little rummage sales, and you just see them on the weekends or whatever. And I found so many things. I found a treasure trove of old photos, which I love to collect, black and white. I found, oh, this man had a ton of them from 1940 because there was a date written on the other side. And so I could use these photographs of a deserted Paris, you know, after the Germans had marched in. And it was so amazing to have that. And it was helpful writing. But those kinds of things, you know, flea markets, old photos, music, records of that time, songs of that time, you know, fashion, what people wore, what people could not afford to buy, what people couldn't find, you know, because it wasn't made at that time. You know, there's films, a lot of films, there's YouTube videos, there's artworks, there's oral history, really helpful oral history. I found a lot of those, especially when I was writing about a character who was from backwoods rural Oregon, who grew up in the 30s. I could find some historical oral history up at the Oregon Historical Society, which was incredibly helpful. So I think throughout that, you know, building this location, you're saying to yourself, you're asking yourself, what is it like to be in this place at this time, right? And you ask, how do my characters feel in this place at this time? And here's where you go and you use all the, you know, sight and sound and smell and touch and taste. And we can use all of those senses. There's a novel, it was called Perfume, and by Patrick Suskind. I think they made a kind of funny movie with Dustin Hoffman later, but it's called Perfume. It's an old book, but it's amazing. It's an example of a physical temporal place, which is 18th century Paris, being evoked only through the sense of smell. And you have a character who was born in Les Halles, the old vegetable, you know, the market, huge market in Paris, called The Belly of Paris by Zola or Balzac, I can't remember which one. And a baby is born by one of the fishwives under the table, and it's amazing. So, I mean, that is all smell. But it's things like not just saying a bird flew in the sky, it's what kind of bird? What kind of bird would be there then, at that time, at that season, you know? It's also important to bring in seasonal, you know, clothing. Are they wearing overcoats? Are they wearing tank tops? Is it, what's in the market? What kind of food is in the market that would be, seasonal? And I wonder if there are any questions that have come through or any comments you want to make, because I've been going on a lot about place.
Yeah, Cara, there's one that was interesting. When you write so much about where you use place so much, how do you keep that fine line so you don't make it a travelogue of visiting, Paris? How do you make it so unique to your story?
That's a great question. Yeah, you don't want to have a travel log, definitely, because you can buy a travel, you can go to Lonely Planet, right? And yeah, so I think that goes back to um, place informing and reflecting the character in the plot. It's how your character feels about that place. It's how we as a writer feel. Okay, this is what I'm feeling. Okay, it's cold, it's twilight, looks like it's going to rain. I forgot my coat, or whatever is you're evoking of that time. So how, so as a person, I would feel that. But then my character, who, how would they feel it? Because are they going home? Do they still have to go shopping? Are they working on a case? Are they following someone? Are they stuck out on the street doing surveillance without a raincoat? It's putting it in the character. I've always said from my Amy Leduc books, she's a PI in Paris, I want you, if I've done my job right, standing in her stilettos on the corner, buying a newspaper, Le Parisien, smelling the butter from the boulangerie, catching a whiff of a gitan as someone goes by, hearing, I don't know, hearing the bus clacking over the cobblestones. I want you in her stilettos if I can. You're there with her. You're seeing what she's seeing. You're hearing what she's hearing. It goes through a lot of times. It's really helpful in a cafe when they have, they used to play the radio a lot, like a sports channel or something. But of course, now they have the televisions, but more in the 90s when she was a detective, there's a lot of radio. So there'll be the news at the top of the hour or a news flash. So you've got that, which is a great way to introduce time and setting, that this happened, at this time when there was whatever happening. So we were not saying it was June 13th, 1993, and, it's you have that shown maybe in a radio broadcast, certain news happening of the day. My next book, Next Amy, next year, takes place 2.5 months after 9/11. So there's a lot of reference to 9/11, but it's a French way, because in France, 9/11 was looked at, experienced differently. Um, so so I can refer to that a lot, but you can refer to the historical times. And that's what someone would have been feeling at that time. I think that's what you aim for. You can have a notebook with all your wonderful travel log feelings, but, feelings and having your character have feelings is um, really important.
There's another question, and this is from Lori King. Do you have any online places you find useful for research since none of us can travel right now?
Hi, Lori. I think online, okay, what I do for Paris is that I have joined several historical societies in the different arrondissements, but also each arrondissement, excuse me, each district, excuse me, each district has a mairie, which is a town hall. And that's where you go to, register your birth, your child's birth, or weddings, where you get married in a civil ceremony. It's where you sign your kid up for school. It's where you get your benefits, many, many things. So it's like a little mini town hall in each arrondissement. And each arrondissement has also like cultural associations. They have a historical association. They have concerned citizens that talk about, oh, let's do a rummage sale, or let's clean up this park, or let's, whatever, let's have a big, in the summer, they often have these big association dinners where make a big table down a whole street with trestles, and people cook and they eat together in a small quartier, one street. So I follow you can just sign up for them. You go like to the mairie of that district, you look for the associations. So I think I do a lot of that. I find out what kind of groups are very viable. I also use this because this is my Bible. Because if there's a street somewhere and I need to find it, it's here. And I also look in here and I find little alleys, little passages that look very tiny. And then I go to Google Earth and I look at them. So I'm kind of watching on Google Earth something that looks so tiny and it can be incredibly beautiful. I've discovered small squares and passages. It can also be, totally torn down. So I can go and look at a lot of things on Google Earth, which is helpful. And I follow people on Instagram who are living in Paris and there's one guy who takes his dog out several times a day, but Hector. And so he takes Hector out every, late afternoon, early. So Hector always goes different places. So Hector, I just go for a walk with Hector, kind of virtually, and I hear the sounds. And then sometimes I play that on a loop. I just love those sounds of hearing the dog going for a walk down the Champ de Mars or down to the Seine. So I find those things really helpful. I mean, nowadays, Instagram Live, who would have thought? But find someone where your character is and see them take a walk or go to the market or, I don't know. I think that's really fun. Again, there was one where he was taking Hector for this long walk and talking about, it was lockdown and no one was out. So you could hear the Seine. It was beautiful and the birds. And I just played that loop. I got a lot of writing done. It was just in the background, a loop of those sounds and seeing Hector, going over the cobblestones. So those kinds of things can really help. I mean, we can turn those things to our advantage. Anything else? Oh,
Sorry, I was muted. Just, you hold on one second. I've got,
got a call?
well, yeah, but I'm not going to answer. um, you've done a series and you've done a standalone. Do you find how you express location different in either the series or the standalone?
Oh, definitely, because Amy Leduc is more contemporary Paris, though she's in the 90s or going up to the 2000s. Yeah, it's a modern young woman who, is a fashionista and who has a child and man trouble. So yes, how she views the city and how she uses it and her job we see Paris through her eyes, her Paris. Kate Reese, an American, an outsider, who's a big bone gal from backwoods Oregon, has another way of interpreting Paris because she had been there in the summer of 1937 when she met the man who became her husband, Welshman, David. And it was the summer of 37 when there were all these people. And it was when they thought, it was the summer that peace could happen. This is before World War II. So there was definitely a different feeling. But when she comes back to Paris for things I can't tell you, spoiler, it's very different. It's 2 weeks into the German occupation of Paris. It's occupied, okay? It's totally different. And so she's seeing it and she's comparing it also in her mind to Paris that was light and happy and flowers and people wore summer frocks and, and all, and being in love, meetings and, just changes as to oppose now. So Kate is kind of contrasting that to more, her time when she met her husband and fell in love in Paris and all these new cultural experiences to coming back with a mission and then being involved in a cat and mouse to try and escape from the Germans. So she's seeing it differently. So I, as a writer, had to write it from that perspective. I had to try and get into Kate's viewpoint, what it was like for her first, what it was like then. And of course, what made it easier is that Kate is a total outsider. She's from backwoods Oregon, okay? And I can always relate to being an outsider, but having a familiarity. And so that was the kind of hinge that really helped. Having a character that's an outsider, so things are new to them or they view it differently, or they're commenting on it. And that's how you do it. Oh, why did I have Siri on? Excuse me. Where's
You sound like me. I have another question for you. This is from Tammy Quails. Do you set limits to your research, such as time per day or 1 day a week? And she comments, it's easy to get immersed in it, which can be distracting for writing.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole, totally. I could research all day, and that would be wonderful. Um, it kind of depends. I never stop researching when I'm writing, but I'm always researching. When I go to Paris, which I have been, not now, but twice a year, I keep different notebooks. I have my notebook for my Amy, I have my notebook about things I want to remember. And then I have another notebook that nothing of things that are amazing that don't fit in either place. And a lot of those notes about World War II, because I was always finding information about World War II, or hearing a conversation, or seeing an exhibit, or my friends telling me about her uncle's experiences in the resistance and many, many things. They never fit anywhere until I could use them in the Kate book. So I've always got those things. I think you never stop researching. There may be times when I'll be in the manuscript and I know I need to find out about this kind of gun, right? I have to get it right, because we know gun people don't like it when it's wrong. And so I would put an X or, some mark, and I'd go back to that. I'll do the research, and get it correct. Or I'd have a question about certain kind of plants. Would they be in season or flowering at this time? And, I want to get that detail correct. And a lot of times I don't want to spend the time. I just want to write it and go back in and put that. Sometimes I have a lot of things that I want to use in the story, and then I work that plot point, or I write a scene that will, that will show that storyline. So I'm always researching.
That was our last question.
Thank you.
Anything else that you'd like to add to close us out with?
Sure. I just want to thank NorCal MWA for inviting me, and hoping this was helpful to you. My website is, carablack.com. It's run by Sue Trowbridge, who does our NorCal website. What a beautiful job. She's wonderful. And I just, or come on Facebook, ask me questions. I don't know. Who are you having in, who's the next guest you're going to have talk about writing?
We're going to have something on what makes a cozy a cozy. I think it's Eileen Rendell.
Oh, she's great. Eileen's great. So yeah, these are wonderful. So I hope you got something out of location, and happy writing, everybody, and happy holidays.